Hey everyone, welcome to Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast. I am Heather Hoops Matthews here in the studio in Columbia, South Carolina today, joined by co-host Lauren DeMoss. She is a healthcare attorney in Birmingham, Alabama. Lauren, good to be with you.
Thanks so much, Heather. Great to be here today.
And we are delighted to have joining us today Maynard Nexsen's Government Investigations and White Collar Practice Group members. We have practice group leader Erica Barnes, who is in Birmingham, Alabama, along with Mark Moore, who is in Columbia, South Carolina, here with me today, and Christian Dysart, who is in our Raleigh, North Carolina office. All of you, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be involved.
We are going to get started by welcoming Christian. You are new to the Maynard Nexsen family. Christian, if you'd start us off, just tell us a little bit about your background and your experience with white-collar crime, and specifically in the healthcare industry.
Absolutely. So again, I'm Christian Dysart. My team and I, we're 4 lawyers total. We joined Maynard Nexsen a little over a week ago, and we're very excited to now be part of this team and to get to work with Mark and Erica and others. We really started emphasizing our white collar practice about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago. And during that time, most of our work has been representing individuals rather than the companies, but individuals who were either under investigation, had received a target letter, or were potentially witnesses in healthcare and other white collar matters. So we've represented mental health professionals, dentists, doctors, and others who had been brought into the criminal justice system in some way.
Well, welcome. We're glad you're with us.
We're very excited to be
Yeah, so Erica, let's talk a little bit about current trends in false claims prosecution. As you know, this has always been and continues to be a big deal in the healthcare industry. And I think the number I saw is $2.7 billion in revenue in False Claim Act settlements and judgments last year in 2023. What are some of the latest trends you're seeing in this area, and what can we kind of expect, in 2024?
Well, I'll point out 2 things I'm seeing, Lauren, and then Mark might have others. One is, while we're still seeing sort of the huge settlements that we've always seen with pharmaceutical companies and large hospital systems, we're seeing more resolutions with mid-sized to smaller businesses, right? Chains of practice groups, smaller DME providers. And while the numbers are smaller on those resolutions, the impact on those companies, I would argue, is larger and more significant. And the burden of those investigations on those businesses that may not have full-time in-house legal or compliance resources is tremendous. So that's one trend I'm seeing. And I think that trend is being driven by the second trend, which is a greater emphasis on self-reporting and whistleblowers as a source of cases. Now that the FCA covers so many types of businesses and so much conduct, there is really a lot of potential things for the government to look at, and they can't look at them all. So I think they're relying more and more on whistleblowers to bring them cases, and then businesses, quite frankly, to investigate themselves and self-report, which is why you're seeing some of those smaller cases.
And so in my practice, one of the things that I'm seeing is still DOJ has a continued focus on labs and lab prosecutions, and also going after marketers. And there are arguments, and you see, both criminal and civil investigations being conducted simultaneously of labs, marketers, and other professionals, despite the fact that telemedicine grew so much during COVID, out of necessity, right? Okay, DOJ still doesn't seem to love telemedicine, and they don't seem to love telemedicine providers, and they seem to be focused a lot on those folks. When Erica talks about whistleblowers, as I think everyone knows, the False Claims Act is primarily driven by whistleblowers. Whistleblowers file a qui tam under seal. and then they take it to DOJ, and DOJ decides whether they will or won't intervene. And in some districts, they may take a long, long time to make a decision. In some other places, they may take less. You know, one of the things that happened last year in the Supreme Court, which obviously we all sort of follow Supreme Court developments, is Justice Thomas, joined by two other justices, raised a question as to whether the qui tam provisions of the False Claim Act are constitutional, assuming that the government doesn't intervene. And so folks are filing challenges. I'm involved in one of those challenges in this district, and we expect that that will ultimately be resolved by the Supreme Court. But if, for instance, the Supreme Court says that those provisions are unconstitutional, you know, the vast majority of false claims cases are litigated in this country when the government doesn't intervene. The government only intervenes in a small percentage of cases. And so I think you're going to see a real sea change as the Supreme Court does what I hope it's going to do and rule that the qui tam provisions are unconstitutional.
You know, I think I hear a couple kind of to summarize the trends. One, it sounds like America, you know, there's no such thing as flying under the radar maybe anymore in terms of size. If you think you're kind of too small to be noticed, maybe that's certainly not the case anymore, and you want to get your ducks in a row. And then it sounds like for Mark too, you know, still a little bit of follow through from some of the COVID trends, the labs and the testing, and then also the telemedicine. So 4 years later, I think we're looking at maybe some of that fallout. Anyway, just kind of summarizing the trends I think that I hear them saying that are out there that we should be, you know, paying attention to.
And speaking of that, watching closely, outside of the False Claims Act, Mark, let's start with you, and really Christian and Erica, you know, all three of you for this question. What are some other healthcare cases, A, that you have, or B, that you're watching closely that could have these sorts of sea changes in the industry?
Well, so many of the healthcare cases that I watch, okay, have an impact in the false claims arena as well as the criminal arena, and that's what I primarily do, right? And we work closely with the folks in our healthcare practice group on those, and also advising on some other issues. But usually, you see in when the government's involved, you usually see the government going after a case civilly, sometimes administratively, and also criminally. And so the cases that I look at and look at trends, you know, one of the things that I think we're all going to be dealing with is the impact of super value, another Supreme Court case that was decided last year. And in that case, a unanimous Supreme Court, and we rarely get unanimous Supreme Court opinions, but in that case, the Supreme Court said that the scienter requirements of the False Claims Act, and scienter sort of is similar to, not exactly the same as, but similar to criminal intent. Okay, the scienter prong of the False Claims Act is not an objective standard; it's a subjective standard measured by the subjective views or beliefs of the filer of the claim at the time the claimant filed. And so I think that sort of seeing how super value is going to play out in the district courts in litigation is something that I'm watching closely. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
I'll sort of see one thing that I'm seeing, and then see if Christian has an additional thing, which is that the AKS is continuing, and by that I mean the anti-kickback statute, is continuing to be the largest driver of healthcare fraud criminal cases that I'm seeing. And it's primarily on the sales practices side. Those cases can be brought civilly as false claims cases, but I think people forget that the AKS is fundamentally a criminal statute. And I'm seeing the department go after more and more sales professionals, particularly in the DME space, the medical device space. I just did an analysis of looking at different criminal healthcare fraud cases across the country, and that is the largest trend. And either fortunately for us as lawyers, but unfortunately for our clients, the largest volume of cases is in the South, from Texas across through Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and into Tennessee. That's based on where DOJ has put their healthcare resources. But those jurisdictions, again, up and through the Carolinas, tend to be prosecuting AKS cases as criminal healthcare fraud cases rather than civil false claims cases, which is really, really unfortunate, because our clients are looking at incarceration as opposed to just money.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I recently had a case in Florida. It started out as an AKS case related to a medical sales professional, but it ultimately had a dramatic impact on the healthcare providers, the doctors themselves. And my client was a physician who was only at that practice for a short period of time, but it resulted in a significant shutdown of her practice while we navigated what initially was a civil DOJ investigation. Again, not into her, but it had a dramatic impact on her daily life during the pendency of that investigation.
And so if I could just add one other point on AKS, I mean, one of the things that we try to do in that arena is if it's just a standalone AKS case, not an AKS case combined with other things, we've had some luck in talking the government into not proceeding criminally in a standalone AKS case. And because I don't know that an AKS case by itself, standing alone, has a ton of jury appeal in certain cases. And so that's one of the things that we try to look at in AKS prosecutions.
You know, Erica, Christian mentioned he's new, and we're thrilled to have him here, and other white collar attorneys in North Carolina. Can you talk a little bit about the firm's strategy in terms of our white collar practice, and now that we have, resources in multiple states?
Absolutely. So I think all of us post-pandemic have gotten used to doing a lot more remotely, right? And representing clients in places that we don't live. And I think that's fantastic. And so much of our work can be done by getting on a Zoom call or getting on a phone call or jumping on a plane when we need to. But we often help clients with things that are the worst day of their business, right? Or sometimes the worst day of their life, if we're talking about potential incarceration. And you cannot underestimate the fact that you have to have those conversations in person, both with the client and with the prosecutors, right? You have to develop those relationships. You have to be sitting in the room sometimes with those individuals. And so we thought it was incredibly important as our client base grew in the Carolinas to have people on the ground who could have those in-person meetings with our Carolina-based clients and could also have in-person meetings with our regulators and prosecutors and had those relationships. And Christian and his team had spent 15 years building those. And so we're incredibly happy that we're now going to be able to offer that to our clients.
Yeah.
And I'll echo Erica's sentiments there and just say that I learned a long time ago that reputation is really the only thing you have. And my team and I have worked really hard to develop the kind of relationships that, they know we'll fight when we have to, but we also are trusted and respected by prosecutors and agents across the state. And I agree with Erica. Sometimes you need boots on the ground. And sometimes the fact that we have worked with regulators or agents, federal agents across the state on other cases, they at least know that we'll treat them fairly and they'll treat us fairly. And we practice in all 3 federal districts in North Carolina on a regular basis. And so we are able to get involved at a moment's notice for any of our clients here in North Carolina.
It's also helpful to have people to bounce things off of. Okay, I've got a particular thorny issue. Who do I go to? Okay, since we merged, since Maynard Nexsen was founded just slightly over a year ago, I mean, Erica has been someone who is on my speed dial list. Probably too much for her taste. But we talk daily, and we talk about how we can work together to serve our clients. And since Christian has joined, and really sort of even before Christian officially joined us, we've referred cases to each other. We've worked on cases together. And I think that Christian just adds something to our team, and it makes us an even more symbiotic team, I believe.
And a growing team, which is exciting to watch you grow. I mean, I hate to say it's because clients are in trouble. I realize that. But who do you want when you're in trouble? You want the best, right? And so I look forward to seeing, Erica, who you guys add next to the 10-state footprint. I'm sure it will be someone soon.
Absolutely. And we look at it not as more people getting in trouble, but more people realizing that we're the best bang for the buck when they get in trouble. We're providing the highest quality advice for the best price. So
Well, Erica Barnes, Christian Dysart, Mark Moore here in the studio with me. Thank you all so much for joining us today. For those of you who tuned in, we hope you enjoyed this conversation, learned a little bit more about white-collar crime. And on behalf of the whole team here, we look forward to seeing you next time right here on Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast.